So first of all, welcome to those of you from Viterbi and USC. My name is Ken Hayes. I titled this Entrepreneur Trends in Cleantech and Sustainability with the subtitle, "Thank you, sir, may I have another?" I should have made a poll question to ask how many of you know that phrase. And if you're a student at USC, it should be pretty well ingrained in you. But the reason is that cleantech as an industry has really had some ups and downs, and I'm going to cover that. I'm an optimistic person, so I think there's a reason to be optimistic. But what I want to do is give you all kind of an insight into that area, and I'm going to cover the Cleantech Open, which is an organization that I run, and use that as kind of a microcosm for the industry. So I will continue here, and so for me, I'm in my mid-50s. This is kind of my second career. Like many of you, I was a grad student. I was an MBA, although I went to school in Europe. I became an entrepreneur, built up several companies, had a couple of modest exits, and leveraged that to become an angel investor. And from there, leveraged it to co-founding a VC fund out of Santa Monica called Canyon Creek Capital. My partner, Buck Jordan, started it, and then I joined him for Fund 2, which we launched around 2015. We've actually invested in 40 companies. Most of them are based in Los Angeles or Southern California. And in 2017, I had an epiphany when I read the book by Michael Bloomberg called The Climate of Hope, which is about how clean tech and sustainability technologies are some of the greatest business opportunities of our generation. I thought, you know what, I need to do something better with my life than just try to flip companies. And I want to help entrepreneurs actually make the world a better place. And I also wanted to have more scale and impact than just working in one company at a time. So I joined Cleantech Open as the National Executive Director, parallel with co-running this venture fund out of Santa Monica. And then I also do advisory work for a number of companies. And every once in a while, I jump back in as an executive in a startup. But Cleantech Open is really where my passion is right now. And the mission of Cleantech Open is we are an organization that finds, funds, and fosters entrepreneurs with big ideas that address today's most urgent energy, environmental, and economic challenges. And that's a really big mission, and it spans a huge geography. And we actually have quite a big reach. We're actually the world's largest clean technology accelerator. We are a nonprofit 501c3. It was founded in 2005. So I only joined it about 3 years ago. We have over 1,000 volunteers around the world, around the country. We run in 6 regional organizations. Normally we put on 100 events around the United States. This year, of course, like you all, we're doing everything in Zoom, and we just had 4 days of national academies, kind of like an MBA boot camp for entrepreneurs that were, we had two days for the West, 2 days for the East, with about 35 speakers, several hundred participants for 8 hours a day, highly interactive, worked out great. But at the end of the day, we'd rather meet in person. We run a cohort, which runs once a year. It just launched here in June. We work with international companies as well in a global ideas competition. And we actually had a partnership with the United Nations running Cleantech Open in developing countries. So it's quite a broad organization. And we work on early stage companies. So many of you, if you're entrepreneurs, are starting out in kind of what I would call the research grant bootstrapping stage. Cleantech Open works with entrepreneurs when they've just formed a business. There may be 2 or 3 people. They have a prototype or a proof of concept, and now they're trying to go out to raise some angel funding and get their first pilot projects, try to get exposure to the commercial side of the ecosystem and really grow. And then we help companies get through that stage until they can raise a Series A funding and larger amounts. By the way, if you have any questions, you are most welcome to put them in the chat. I will let Cami and Arcella decide if they want to interrupt me. I'm happy to be interrupted and have you guys go on screen and ask your question. Otherwise, we'll take it when I get through this presentation. But I want to give you a little overview of kind of, and by the way, we have done work with USC, and we have a number of companies have come out of USC that then went into Cleantech Open. So that's definitely a possibility for a lot of you. We actually held our big annual event, the Global Forum, at the USC Hotel right across the street from the MBA building in November this past year. So we have a good partnership with USC. This is just an example of a company we worked with. You know, again, we work with 100 a year, and our alumni are quite loyal. And this company was, although it was an experienced entrepreneur, was very pleased about the kind of work that we did with them. And they've gone on to since to raise money and things like that. We have lots of these kinds of examples. I'm not going to go through them here, but the point is that a program, whether it's Cleantech Open or something else, that lasts, in our case, for about 5 months, can be really helpful to you as an entrepreneur to really dig into the ecosystem and understand who the players are and really figure out how you can raise money from experts and really get out there. So when we talk about clean tech, we in our organization cover kind of 8 sectors. Energy is really the largest, whether it's generation, distribution, energy efficiency. This year, in a cohort of 100 companies, I think we have 8 companies that are doing battery technology. You know, whether it's some kind of chemical or chemistry difference in batteries, or tracking efficiency and battery use and recharging, things like that. We have a lot of companies in the green building space with smart cities, with transportation like EV charging, things like that. Agriculture, ag tech is the fastest growing segment in clean tech right now. That's everything from food production to preventing food spoilage to food transportation. I think we have over 20% of our cohort this year is just in ag tech. And then also chemical and advanced materials, new forms of plastics, biodegradable plastics, things like that, and IoT, information technology solutions. So, you know, a lot of solutions cover multiple categories. It could be distributed solar panels that purify water, for example. And believe me, there's a lot of innovation that still has to get done. And when those entrepreneurs go through Cleantech Open, they get matched to mentors, they go through a curriculum, we introduce them to investors, and we help them showcase their businesses, whether it's online or at events or things like that. So it's very involved. And think of kind of what you're doing with the Startup Garage now as kind of that, but you know, several times, you know, longer and more involved, and really with a view towards absolutely raising money for your startup. And then we focus, and this has happened more and more in the recent years since I joined, was to really focus on what happens next after Cleantech Open. So a lot of these companies, they work on their technology, they may move in their early commercialization, they may move into the national laboratories, Lawrence Berkeley Lab up in the Bay Area, or NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab in Denver, or Argonne in Chicago, do a lot for really kind of the proving out their technology while they're building a commercial business. We help them get funding to figure out what kind of grants to get, things like that. They may move into incubators in Los Angeles. Lacey, the LA Cleantech Incubator, is the big player here in Los Angeles. And we continue to maintain relationships with them going forward. It's all with a view towards launching, growing, and scaling their business. So in terms of impact, and this was just a 10-year study we did a few years ago, and we're in the process of updating this. You know, we had about, at that time, about 1,100 companies that had gone through the accelerator, and they ended up creating total revenues about $187 million and raising about $1.2 billion. So it's a pretty successful program and works really well for the companies. So what makes Cleantech Open unique, and what's important about the cleantech space? So this image you see is a bunch of turtles that are climbing out of a swamp, and I consider Cleantech Open to be like the primordial swamp. And excuse me, I'm gonna get this this chat down here. So, hard tech is a big area of Cleantech Open. About 85% of our companies have some kind of difficult, hard technology that they have to develop and invent and figure out how it's going to be technically viable. Our companies all have to document and show how they're either sustainable or create a positive impact in the environment and society at large. We have a deep engagement with our mentors. They're all volunteering. They work with entrepreneurs. And then we have a focus on educating entrepreneurs, even more so than the companies, because we all know that, and I know as a VC, 1 out of 10 companies that we fund is going to be successful. Sorry, I hate to break that news to you, but the odds are really tough. But even if you as an entrepreneur fail in your company going through Cleantech Open, as an entrepreneur, you are more likely to be successful at your next company. And so at the end of the day, we're educating entrepreneurs, not just working with their companies. And again, we're a nonprofit, so we don't invest in the companies. We're not directly putting funding into them. We're helping those entrepreneurs go out and raise funding. So, many of you probably don't know about the history of Cleantech. Cleantech was considered dead after about 2010. In those early days, from the 90s into the mid 2000s, solar was on a big rise, and there was a lot of money pouring into Cleantech, and things like biofuels in particular, and solar technology. And a lot of Silicon Valley VCs got in, and most of them lost money on it. And so Cleantech kind of became a dirty word. And so it really tailed off after 2010, and it started climbing back. And some of these slides here, I gave a presentation at the end of 2019 at Carnegie Mellon, and I was talking about Cleantech as a 2.0. The interesting thing is the federal government, certainly since the Trump administration, has been working against environmental priorities. Cleantech VCs and private equity, we're looking for big exits. Those have not come since 2010. Other technologies are just considered sexier to work with, whether it's AI, machine learning, blockchain, robotics. Cleantech itself was kind of considered a dirty word. And at the end of 2019, we're looking like, okay, is there hope out there? Because it doesn't seem like these outside factors of the world are getting any better. The United States funding from US VCs and private equity was still, you can see here on the chart, was still kind of flattening out. It fell a lot from 2011 to 2012 and just kind of remained stagnant. And the number of deals was also falling. But the interesting thing is other countries, in particular China, started really picking up. And so by 2018, the global VC investment in Cleantech was around over $9 billion, which is pretty darn impressive and larger than we'd seen in prior years. But a lot of that was coming from China, not from the United States. And here's one example of a Cleantech Open alumni company called Virament, which they won the Cleantech Open award in the water category in 2015. And then in President Trump's first trip to China, they sealed, on paper at least, $800 million worth of deals to build some environmental water processing plants and things like that. And they were really well on their way. And we're seeing in Cleantech Open, at least through 2019, that a lot of our alumni companies were having more commercial success overseas than they were in the United States. So on the one hand, that's kind of optimistic. It's great that other countries are investing in this space, but as an American, I'm kind of bummed that we're not doing it here in the United States. But certainly by 2010, the overall funding was up significantly. By the way, these numbers from China investing $100 billion and the United States second most with $64 billion. These are for projects, not just innovation. Cleantech Open works with that little sliver of companies in the very beginning innovation stages. but a lot more money is required to actually implement projects. So it's been very interesting that the money has been picking up. In particular, there's been a lot of money for kind of big infrastructure projects. If you think large solar installations like utility scale that could power an entire city, that size, or all the wind farms out in Mojave Desert do require a lot of money. And it was a good time to be in the growth of clean tech, but tougher in the early stage innovation, which is what we deal with. The truth is that the innovation stage of clean tech needs new entrants. We need both a diversity of investors, so more different kinds of investors, not just like your classic Silicon Valley VC type, but these are family offices, these are wealthy individuals that want to support social causes. They are pension funds and other institutional investors that are getting requirements from their shareholders to invest more responsibly. And there's also been a new wave of investors from strategics like the large global utilities, oil companies. Chevron has been like massively punked in the last just week or so for falling behind its competitors in terms of making commitments to invest in transition to clean energy. So we're getting there. It's getting there slowly, but it's painful. And after I gave this presentation at the end of 2019, I was pretty hopeful. The economy is going well, the stock market's high. Now we can say clean tech 2.0 is dead. And as it comes down to the pandemic, which basically put a massive brake on our economy. And there's a few reasons for this. And there's a link at the bottom of this screen here, bit.ly, to CTO-RC. And you're welcome to go to that. And I'll tell more about what's on that page later, but you can sign up to attend free webinars on specifically this topic on this Thursday. Free to attend. You just have to register. You'll get the link. But what happened is in the early with the pandemic is VCs decided they're going to have to focus their efforts on their existing investment, which the corollary is that they're not investing in as many new companies. The government starts reallocating the funding they have to immediate survival. And I undoubtedly have heard about the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, and things like that. Massive amounts of money, none of it for innovation. It's all just to try to keep existing businesses alive. And then to add, pain on top of all this, at the federal level, the administration is specifically rescinding environmental protection rules and regulations that were driving a lot of the innovation in our space. And they're doing it under the pretext that it's something we can't afford, it's too expensive, and we just have to let companies pollute and harm their workers as a way to get the economy back on track. Personally, I and most of the people in our industry don't believe that. We have a generational opportunity to rebuild our economy in a better manner, and this pandemic is really an opportunity to do that. But the leadership is not going to come from the federal level. Other countries are absolutely going that route. For example, Germany, the rest of the EU are taking advantage of this pandemic to literally just get rid of fossil fuels and make a complete transition. Also in the United States, we're still, nobody talks about it, but we're actually still in the middle of a trade war and increased nationalism. And that is putting a big hamper on companies that have come out of Cleantech Open that have the opportunity to do really well overseas, and they're losing support at home. And that's also very challenging. So I would kind of argue that we're entering an even darker period right now. There is some light at the end of the tunnel, and I will get to that here. But then also you can go to that link as well. And I think in the I'll put here in the I think in fact you need to have the full URL in order for it to be clickable. So I just put that in the chat box to everybody. So, this is really tough, and I don't really mean to be dire. And Arcella told me that this is the first masterclass you guys are getting, and I don't want to start out with all this doom and gloom. But we're also in the middle of a freaking pandemic and a social revolt, which is in many respects kind of overdue. So we have to go through it, but it's tough as an entrepreneur. Still, there are opportunities, and this slide, those of you who've studied business would recognize the valley of death. There's no question that that is a big problem for clean tech companies. You could have a great academic innovation, done some really cool research. Maybe you get something to work at bench scale in a lab, but that doesn't mean it's going to work at utility scale when it gets implemented. And so there's a long period that clean tech companies have to go through before they ever really become profitable or scale, and that's really, really hard to get through. So I'm not sure if I was an entrepreneur that I would start in the clean tech space. Nevertheless, there's like fantastic innovation going on, and there are companies investing in it. So how do you find those companies? How do you find those investors? There are what we call the ecosystem, or the clean tech ecosystem, and I put up a chart from one of our main partners called IN2, that stands for Innovation Incubator. And that's put on by Wells Fargo. They funded, they created the Innovation Incubator. And you can see on the screen a lot of different players all around the United States. Just in Southern California alone, between Caltech, Lacey, the LA Clean Tech Incubator, UC San Diego, and although IN2 doesn't have a partnership with USC, we do in Cleantech Open, but there's a lot of organizations that are together in this ecosystem that all help each other out and help, more important, help the entrepreneurs figure out how to navigate who to work with and like what order do you work with these different kinds of partners. Some of these partners work at the very early stage, others work at the later stage. And as an entrepreneur, that's one of your biggest challenges, is to figure out who do I actually work with and how do I spend my precious time? Who do I spend it with? So someone like an organization like IN2, the Innovation Incubator, is accessible to entrepreneurs kind of through us and those entrepreneurs that work with us. And still, I would say at a macro level, there is hope for clean tech and sustainable startups, even today. And the reason is it's cheaper than ever to start and run a company than it's ever been in history. And that's a really good thing. It means you can get quicker to market, quicker to proving your technology, quicker feedback from early customers, like by doing customer discovery. Some of you may have gone through customer discovery or done the business model canvas. We're a big proponent of that methodology. In fact, we require our entrepreneurs to go through it. And at the end of the day, the result is it's actually cheaper to start a company than it used to be. And then a lot of the core infrastructure for clean tech startups is available now, and it's actually really affordable, like cloud computing, partnerships with manufacturers, facilities to use test equipment, like Lacey, the LA Clean Tech Incubator. 1/4 of their entire space is prototyping labs and 3D printing and testing facilities, things like that. There's a way to kind of soft pilot your technologies before you have to make these massive commitments. So the upshot is, it is pretty confusing, and it's confusing for entrepreneurs to figure out how to actually navigate this and to figure out like where do they invest their time. Some other hopeful signs ahead, and again, I'm kind of evolving the metaphor of the primordial swamp. We help these little companies kind of get onto the log and climb out of the muck and get to the shore, and then we make sure that they can start crawling away before they get eaten by a hawk or a pterodactyl or something. There's no question that we have opportunities to expand geographically. Clean tech is well supported on the West Coast and the East Coast. not so well supported in the middle of the country. We're trying to change that. There's a lot of institutions that are looking to change that. Cleantech Open is a national platform. We're proactively trying to go out to increase the diversity of the founders. And this is not, and this, we've been doing this since before Black Lives Matter, but that's certainly a movement that has highlighted the lack of entrepreneurs and successfully funded entrepreneurs among people of color. But there's also among other dimensions, there aren't enough female entrepreneurs that are getting successfully funded, as well as immigrants. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can classify people that all need to have more opportunity to succeed in the ecosystem. And in Cleantech Open, we accept entrepreneurs from anywhere, but we have to do better at doing outreach to show people that may not have heard about us that a group like us exists. And there has to be a faster evolution. We have to be able to take companies that, when they go through an accelerator like ours, or like the startup garage, how do you get those entrepreneurs to the next stage faster with resources so that they can keep developing? Because most entrepreneurs are impatient, and they want to you guys all want to get things done sooner than later. And you don't want to have to deal with a bunch of bureaucracy or a bunch of nonprofit people, or even worse, academics, to get your businesses up and running. So we know these problems exist in the ecosystem, and that's one reason why Cleantech Open brought me on. My background is in venture and entrepreneurship, not in academia or in nonprofit, and people like me and others that are coming on board trying to get things to move faster. So this is my last slide. I mentioned this link, the bit.ly, that goes to a sub-site on our main page called the Resiliency Challenge. And this is an initiative we put together literally 4 weeks ago, and we raised some funding to support it. And we're basically out to help entrepreneurs right now, not just survive the pandemic. There's not a whole lot we can do about that, but actually how they can grow stronger through these tough economic challenges that we're all going to be facing as business people in the coming months. The webinars and the online workshops and the tools throughout this summer are free for all entrepreneurs, including students. Any of you are welcome to sign up at that link and go for it. We'd love to have you. They're going to be very interactive. This Thursday, we actually have 2 VCs and a portfolio company CEO talking about how VCs specifically help entrepreneurs when the economy is changing, and because it's different to manage your company when times are good versus when times are tough. Also, in the Resiliency Challenge is some prize money available to companies, but they have to be Cleantech Open alumni, so that they're not relevant for you. But the webinars and the web meetings are free and available. So with that, thank you for letting me give this presentation. I'm happy to take questions, and happy to make it as interactive as possible.
Yeah, so let me just jump in really fast. So everyone on the call, depending on how comfortable you are, you can raise your hand if you have a question, and I'd be more than happy to call you out, and you can start your video and your mic. Otherwise, I'm going to jump into some questions that I have now. My first is a pretty basic question. What made you interested in clean tech in the first place? How did you fall into that?
Yeah, so my entire career had nothing to do with clean tech at all, and but the epiphany came when in the venture fund here around 2017, we invested in a company called Miso Robotics out of Caltech, and you might have heard of Flippy, the burger flipping robot. And if that robotic food technology is successful, it's going to put several 100,000 people out of work. And the epiphany for me was I wanted to work with entrepreneurs that were making the world a better place, not just driving massive transitionary challenges. And that's when I thought, you know what, I want to work with entrepreneurs that are trying to make the world a better place, not just driving massive change. Not that there's anything wrong with Flippy the robot, because there are hundreds of companies working on that kind of food tech. So it's going to happen. Those transitions are going to happen in our society. I just wanted personally to be working with technologies that are going to make our lives higher quality.
What kind of advice could you give to these engineering students on how to like, what is the most practical way to enter into clean tech? Let's say they have a heart like you just for the concept of clean tech. What's a good entry point for that?
First of all, I think, this might not be the most common assumption, but I think engineers are perfectly positioned to become really successful entrepreneurs. And the reason is the paradigm of starting a company has changed. It used to just be you would start a company with your gut feel and you would work in stealth for several years and you would launch it. But that has changed, and startups are much more data driven, and generally engineers are more data driven type people, and recognize that that business is actually an iterative development over time. So my advice to engineers is to connect up with a co-founder who might be maybe more marketing oriented, more sales oriented, somebody like that, where they are complementary to your personality, and start a company that way. I actually very rarely invest in single founder companies. Usually they're a team. And if you think of some of the most successful companies out there, Apple was Steve Wozniak, the engineer, Steve Jobs, the marketing guy. Hewlett Packard was Hewlett and Packard. They were very complementary to each other. Even Microsoft was Bill Gates and God, I always forget the guy who owns the Clippers. But you know, most of those big companies were successfully founded by pairs. So my advice is to partner up with somebody.
Oh. Okay, so what about typical questions you get over and over again? Like, what's a common misconception? What do you find yourself repeating on a regular basis when it comes to clean technology?
You know, well, by far the most common question is, how do I get my startup funded? Because startups don't die because they don't, not even because they don't have customers or they can't figure out the technology. They die because they run out of cash, and eventually you have to go put food on the table, and you can only eat ramen at 19 cents a package for so many years before you have to do something different. So the question I get over and over is, how do I fund my startup? And it is really, really hard to do as an individual entrepreneur unless you are part of a bigger program that has that element, whether it's Cleantech Open, we do Investor Connect events, or whether it's being part of the Viterbi Startup Garage and you may tap into alumni from USC or things like that. You have to be part of a network or an ecosystem. It's very hard to raise money randomly. So that's probably by far the most common question I get regarding clean tech.
Do you see any trends in the industry? Is there like a specific area that people are focusing on? Piggyback on that question, what areas of clean tech are traditionally the most fundable, the most successful?
Yeah, so it's by far the biggest in terms of funding is energy, because at the end of the day, energy is the core element, you could say, that drives everything else. If you don't have energy, you can't do anything else. And so progressive states like California, like in particular, California, Massachusetts, and New York have structured their economies to prioritize and allocate funds to invest in innovations for energy. Those three states in particular are driving most of the investment and innovation in energy. And then you have the second big area is in water, because if you have energy, the next thing we all need is water. And in particular in California, there's a lot of innovation going on in things like water purification, water transportation, things like that. And then the next category we see a lot of development in is ag tech, as I mentioned. There's something like 30% of all food is spoiled and thrown away, which means we're spending a lot of energy and a lot of water growing food in the first place, and 30% of it is wasted. So there's a huge opportunity to reduce that wastage. Those are really kind of in California or Los Angeles in particular, transportation is also a big trend, because we're all trying to figure out how to get out of cars, and in particular, get rid of the internal combustion engines. And that hangs a lot together with the electrification and changing energy sources. So there's a lot to get done there. I mean, it's pretty much seems like an endless amounts of problems, but it's also endless opportunities.
What incentives, if any, do fossil fuel companies have, these kind of big potential investors in investing in clean tech? Is there like a way to kind of weasel your way into their good graces and get funding as like a startup?
That's a really good question. And some of the oil companies, like Shell in particular, partnered with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Labs in Denver, and they run an accelerator where Shell funds the money, NREL runs the program, and they specifically engage with startups that are later stage, like after Cleantech Open, and we feed companies into that, where they will fund companies for pilot tests and programs like that. The challenge for the big oil companies is, for them, making a $1 million investment in a startup that's not even a rounding error. They don't even have, it's too expensive for them even to consider doing that. For them, a startup investment is like $100 million. So to get a company from the innovation stage to the point where it needs $100 million may take 5, 6, 10 years before the oil companies are really interested in it. There's another fundamental conflict, which is this kind of cannibalistic issue that if an oil company invests in clean tech, then they're actually reducing the demand for their core business, which are fossil fuels. I think by this point, most of them have seen the writing on the wall, right, that they are going to have to change. And if they don't do it willingly, they're going to get dragged into it. And frankly, they're going to get dragged into it by the changing economics. The marginal cost of energy production now for electricity is cheaper than extracting and burning fossil fuels. There's so many externalities in fossil fuels. Like, think of the fact the United States has to pay for a giant military to be present in the Middle East to secure supply lines. That cost is not built in to the gasoline prices we pay at the pump. That's like completely outside. For the economists on the call, if those externalities were built into the actual cost of gasoline to run our cars, we would flip to electric transportation a lot faster.
Yeah. What about, there are certain industries in the startup world where it actually makes sense to have like a political arm, somebody like a lobbyist on your team, someone who understands the political element of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Like aerospace, Department of Defense, there's just certain industries where it kind of makes sense for some sort of political scientists to be advising you to a degree. Do you think that clean tech is one of those industries where having someone advising you kind of on the landscape of politics and clean tech is an important member of the team?
Well, the answer is, I would say kind of a qualified yes. So, usually to have somebody with that level of expertise, as kind of like a full-time hire would be really, really expensive for an early stage clean tech company. On the other hand, there are, I'll give an example with Lacey, the LA Clean Tech Incubator, which by the way is like literally just 2 miles away from USC in the Arts District in downtown, and they're great. They hold tours. All of you should have the opportunity to go. You should go and see it. They have a government relations VP on staff, and that person is very well connected in our state government to Governor Newsom, to the directly into the mayor's office with Mayor Garcetti. And a person like that, his name is Mike Swartz, he will work with the companies that are associated with Lacey to help them with those kinds of relationships, so that a startup doesn't have to hire somebody at that high level who would be way too expensive and kind of overkill for just one startup. Instead, you can kind of share a person like that among a bunch of startups, and kind of get that great service, but without having the full-time expense.
I guess, do you have any regrets as in your like journey? Is there like a do-over that you wish that you could do? Have you felt really confident about your choices, or kind of a personal?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure my wife can't hear me out of my office. You know what? Yeah. Well, if I think about it, the answer is yes. But actually, it's literally not worth thinking about. I mean, I think if I was going to do it differently, I probably would have rather become an entrepreneur. I would have stayed in industry for more years and made more money, and then gone to become an entrepreneur. Because a lot of entrepreneurs are tempted. They think, oh, I'm going to get this big exit, I'm going to become a multimillionaire. That only happens in less than 1 out of 10 startups. So either you do 10 startups in your career, and you don't know if it's going to be the first one or the 10th one, and it might be none that actually hit it big. My advice to most students is go work for a big company for a few years, build up a nest egg, kind of get your feet, learn how the world works, but don't stay there so long that you lose your soul. Be there specifically to learn how the world works and how big companies work, and use that to build a nest egg, and then jump out and jump into entrepreneurship, and know that it is far harder to be an entrepreneur than it is to work in the corporate world. It's absolutely harder, but it's also way more fulfilling for those that have the personality trait towards entrepreneurship. I mean, you have to be willing to do anything. You have to be willing to, live cheap and really prioritize the long term versus the short term. That's really hard to do. But I'm not gonna get into regrets, because like I can't do it. It's a sunk cost. It's water under the bridge. There's literally nothing I can do about it. But the advice I give people is go out, learn on somebody else's dime, do that long enough, you make some money, and then be an entrepreneur. And then with that, you can kind of infer what my regrets might have been. It's worked out though, but still.
Yeah. Are there any really great resources out there for students? I mean, I know you mentioned Lacey, and a tour would be good. Anything else currently it's hard for anyone to do much of anything except for read or watch things, since we're still kind of being careful with our socialization. So maybe this time where we're all at home, any suggestions for resources? And if you wanted just to share them at another time, I can also pass them along to the students. But anything?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of initiatives, and I showed that chart of the United States with the IN2 ecosystem, And the truth is, all over the country there are there are resources. You can follow the hashtags on Twitter, like hashtag Cleantech, for example, or you can even just follow Cleantech Open and then see some of the posts that we do to then kind of get a sense of the ecosystem. I will in the chat here, although I see it's private, I'm not sure I can change that to everyone, but there's a newer website called climate.careers that is basically like a job board for clean tech and sustainable companies that are looking for really sharp people. So you might consider checking out a site like that to see which companies are actually kind of doing stuff. And my advice to a lot of entrepreneurs is don't try to be an entrepreneur out of the gate. Go work with somebody else for a couple of years and maybe a funded startup like those that are looking for people on climate careers, and then go and start your own company. But hey, I'm not going to judge what you do. I mean, like some first-time entrepreneurs, do really, really well, but it's a more of an uphill battle for sure.
Do you have, and I'll make this the last question, do you have any idea as to when you think there will be a recovery for clean tech post-pandemic and what that timeline might look like?
The answer is I have no idea at all. I thought the stock market would be crashed for a while. It's now like nearly at the all-time highs. It just totally defies expectations. So all I can say is with like 40 million people out of work, I don't care how many came back in the last month. A lot of big companies took the occasion to shed a lot of people, and maybe they'll hire back, 1/4 of those that they laid off. But, our economy has to be going through a really tough period. My guess is it's going to last for a couple of years. For clean tech specifically, there's a growing movement of really wealthy people. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett are a couple of them that are proactively trying to set the stage to fund clean tech companies as part of this recovery. And organizations like Cleantech Open and Lacey and others, Greentown Labs in Boston, have coalesced our efforts to lobby Congress to say, hey, if you're going to be giving away hundreds of billions of dollars, let's at least allocate them towards cleaner technologies that also employ a lot of people. And so if we're going to rebuild our economy, let's at least do it in a cleaner, better way, rather than we should not be trying to go back to what was normal, because that didn't work for too many people and it didn't work for our society. So we don't want to go backwards. Let's figure out how to go forward. So there may be some big initiatives opening up, at the micro level, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs are dealing with, how do I make payroll? How do I raise $1 million? There are still funders that have publicly committed to funding startups, and that continues to happen. But it's tougher. It's never been easy for clean tech companies. Now it's tough. So hopefully I'll be the most pessimistic presenter you guys have of this series, and then it'll only get better. And who knows? It looks like LA is opening up. Maybe all this coronavirus stuff will go away. My friends that are living in China right now say don't hold your breath. So we'll see how it turns out.
Well, thank you so much. So nice to have you kick off our series. I think that clean tech is obviously a very important space to innovate in. I hope that all of our students who are here take a look into different ways that we can solve problems using engineering. It sounds like the project direction is a good one, having a partner, is a great way to start off. It also sounds like don't hold your breath on it getting any better anytime soon, and kind of like saddle in and work hard, which I think is probably true for every industry. So it's not.
Yeah, actually, and my last point is the advantage now is you already know now it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
If you started your company in February and budgeted, oh, money's easy, a lot of investors have a lot of money, I'll have no problem raising money, and you built your business model around those assumptions, then right now you're hating life. But if you're starting something now and you know that it's going to be tough, you can actually build your model taking that assumption into place. I can guarantee you no entrepreneur's worst case scenario in their planning in February included a pandemic where everything stopped dead.
Right.
Like that was in nobody's scenario.
Yeah.
But that can be in your scenario now, and that puts you a step ahead of a lot of those companies if you're starting from scratch.
Very interesting perspective. It's super true. Okay, well, thank you so much. If you guys have any looming questions beyond this time, please email me and I will send those over to Ken and see if we can't get some additional answers down the line. Otherwise, I'm going to say bye to you. I'm going to stop the recording.